Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and online. So whether you're in Bristol or far away, you can join in and you're welcome. My name is Emma Bolton. I'm a white woman with short brown hair, blue shirt and grey jeans. I'm going to say a little bit more about the PM Studio, then introduce today's talk. A warm welcome to anyone here or online who is new to the studio. If you don't know much about the Pervasive Media Studio, we are a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology with everything from comedy to coding, product development and performance art. We are a home for embryonic ideas, research and development, and the building of new companies. We are a meeting place for both the creative and commercial industries. We offer studio space and desk space, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities to our residents as part of our spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. We are a space for people to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. The PM Studio Lunchtime Talks are part of the Open Studio Friday offer. Every Friday, the Pervasive Media Studio throws open its doors and offers you the chance to spend time in the space. You can hot desk here from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. every Friday. A quick bit of housekeeping. Feel free to move around, make a cup of tea or grab a glass of water from the kitchen just behind you over there. We have a quiet space to the left of this space for anyone that needs to take a break at any point. Give me a second. There's a little bit more. Fire exits at either end of the studio, and one of the studio team will direct you should we need to use them. Accessible toilets and baby change can be found in the corridor next to the kitchen, just at the back there. A captioned version of this talk will also be available on the same link after the talk is finished. There is a Q&A at the end of the talk. For those watching online, pop your questions in the YouTube chat or tweet us at PM Studio UK. If you're in the building, just raise your hand and we will pass this mic around. Today's talk is by Sophie Shaw and James Wheale, founders of Stormjar, an immersive experience company which explores the future of the haunted house. For the past 6 months, they've been doing research and development with Arts Council England, Bristol and Bath Creative R&D, and Audience of the Future on starting a new business in the experiential sector and immersive horror. They'll be sharing their learnings, insight, tools they've discovered along the way. So, pass it over to James and Sophie.
Do we need... Oh.
Sorry, James.
Do we need to describe what we look like? Is that helpful?
Yeah, if you would, yeah.
Cool. So I'm Sophie. I'm a white woman with red hair, and I'm wearing a black and white stripy shirt. We are Stormjar. I'm going to kick things off to begin with.
I'm not that casual. I'm not just sitting here like, yeah, I'm going to talk from here. She's opening.
So first of all, big thank you to the Pervasive Media Studio for organising this talk, Emma for hosting, Jack on tech, and Julia, who is interpreting our talk today. The image you can see on the screen here is of Malik Ibhais, who's playing the sleep paralysis demon as part of our immersive horror experience, The Nightmare Market, which we will be talking about. But I'm also going to be talking very generally about immersive horror experiences. You'll be relieved to know that there are no jump scares or anything throughout this talk. It's just going to be us talking it through. But we do appreciate that you've come out to a talk about horror on a sunny day in July. So clearly you are one of us. So I'm Sophie. I'm the co-founder and creative producer of Stormjar. My career in immersive, I suppose, started in 2009 when I joined the Invisible Circus for their immersive spectacular Carnival, which took place in the Bridewell complex, which to this day I would still say is one of the biggest and best immersive experiences that has ever happened in Bristol. From then on, I've ended up specialising in live immersive experiences and site-specific experiences. I've assistant produced a 70,000 capacity immersively theatrical festival called Boomtown, as well as their nightclub, which was called Area 404, which was a 3,500 capacity warehouse complex, which has now become Wake the Tiger, an experiential art park that opens tomorrow, actually. I started working in hybrid experiences when I started working with Punch Drunk International on the third day, which was a collaboration with HBO and Sky, and that was dubbed as the world's first immersive TV show. And then, James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm James. No. Hi, I'm James. I'm a white man, and I look like I was drawn by a child with a crayon. It's a fairly good description. I'm an immersive artist. I spent the last 10 years as a resident in the studio exploring things like multi-sensory storytelling, presence during immersion, and storytelling with food. I work with Innovate UK as the creative sector lead in the Southwest for the Edge team, and I've provided consultancy to brands like Unilever and Arcadia on designing immersive experiences or telling multi-sensory stories.
So in terms of how we met, between 2009 and 2015, there was a company called Slingshot, and they had a very popular citywide chase game called 2.8 Hours Later, which essentially was a game where 500 players would get chased by 200 volunteer zombies through multiple locations within a 3-mile radius of a city. James and I used to write and direct different tours of this game over many years, where we went to about 12 cities in the UK for each tour. Anyway, that's how we met. There were some key kind of takeaway learnings sort of thing that we took away from this, from that entire kind of experience. First thing being, it was really interesting to know actually how diverse and broad the audience was for such a mainstream horror experience. Also in terms of the volunteer zombie community, how much they really cared and invested in making it a really inclusive and welcoming community. And quite critically, how good we got at getting fake bloodstains out of hire car seats so we didn't get fined. Since then, we have moved on and worked on other projects. Always one, always one. Oh, she's still going. Since then, we've moved on and worked on other projects. But as we've noticed, there's been a bit of a rise and embracing of horror, both in audiences and critically, over the past few years. So we've come back to it. We just couldn't help ourselves. So it's about immersive, so you've got to get involved. It's not all me. I want you to do something for me, is I want you to think about what comes to your mind when you think of horror experiences. I want you to go on your phone, get your phone out, menti.com, put in this code 87454670. You've only got 2 minutes, it's really quick, whatever comes top of your head. What comes to your mind? Will this work? No.
Also, you got rid of the code before people could write it down.
I know, sorry, I was trying to do actually, I'll give you a minute to do it, and then I'm going to swipe to the results, hopefully in one smooth action.
Cool.
Yeah.
We should have got some like filler music, you know, like music. Ba 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 ba, ba-na-na, ba-na-na-na, ba-na-na. I thought we had some earlier, actually.
You got to do like a horror tune.
I can't do that as well. That is too much. Horror music. Well, that's copyright. We can't use that. What I was saying was completely generic.
I'm worried the swipe isn't going to work like I did earlier.
Well, you put some tension in. That's exciting. Will it work? Will it not work?
Will it work?
Very exciting. Has everyone done their little texty bit?
Done? Yeah? Can be a couple of words. It's literally the first thing that comes to your mind. Let's try. What if I hit
I'm not laughing at you, but...
Oh no, I've ruined it. Jack, I'm really sorry.
What was meant to happen?
Well, it was meant to be another screen would pop up that would show the results. I'm swiping, and I'm getting no joy. And I can't see where the mouse is. Oh, it's because it's on this screen. If you go along, there you go. Oh, it was so slick when we rehearsed this. Yay! Okay.
5 days of rehearsals.
Okay, so interesting because this can mean so many different things to different people. We've got ghost train, ghost houses, massive dark spaces, tension, jump scares, the occult, Derren Brown horror mazes, Avon Valley, people jumping out on you, suspenseful sound design, jump scares. Yeah, we've got jump scares quite a bit.
Adrenaline a lot as well. That's interesting.
What is there?
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline, suspense music. Yeah, adrenaline a few times as well.
Are you going to need to go back?
Oh no. Oh no. Trying to navigate that tiny mouse. If I swipe now, do you want it? Oh no. Okay. Okay, how do I hit that green thing? What if I hit that? I'm
Yeah.
so
Come
sorry.
on.
Just stay under the table.
That is the one time I change from a presentation. Just hit play from current slide, I guess. Yep. Well.
Yay! All right. Seamless.
Seamless. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. So, the past 6 months, we've been doing a series of R&D projects to look at the future of horror experiences. So some of those things you were just talking about in terms of things you thought of, we've been looking at those sort of things. And then we've been feeding some of the outputs of this and our findings into Stormjar and what we're doing. So in terms of our vision of what we decided kind of Stormjar will be doing, is we've nailed it into this one sentence, which is reimagine, design, and build hybrid immersive experiences with a horror twist for modern audiences. Now, the immersive and experiential industry has gone through quite a significant amount of development over the past 10 years or so, and the genres and definitions are still evolving, I suppose. However, when we talk about an immersive experience, this is very simply how we're just defining it for now. An experience that narratively puts the audience in the world, in the story world, in whatever shape or form that may be. That can vary, sometimes in a little, sometimes a lot, but they're just in there. And then in terms of different types of immersive experiences, we just think about it in terms of 3 very simple different categories. You've got live. This means an audience has to be physically present in a physical location. An example you've got is something like London Tombs, the London Bridge experience, where you have mannequins and you rip off heads and it's very gory, stuff like that. You might have been on school trips, done something like this. And then you've got digital, which is a completely online, digital-only experience. You don't need to be physically anywhere. You can do this from any location. An example here being Hallows Hill, which is a virtual escape room experience, which you do entirely on Zoom. And then the third category is hybrid. Hybrid is where you've got elements of live, and then you've got elements of digital, and it kind of combines them together and embraces both. So an audience can participate in a live physical environment, but also interact in a digital way online as well.
Much like this talk.
So that's kind of where we're going to be coming into things a little bit, is we're really looking at the hybrid sort of area. And the nightmare market, which is, again, Malik's amazing face here, is the thing that we're creating, which is going to be of this hybrid model. In terms of the digital and physical elements, though, we're not going to be separating them. They will be linked, and James will later talk about how they're going to be linking together. So first R&D project we did was I got a Develop Your Creative Practice grant from the Arts Council. This is because I've been working in immersive for over 10 years now, and there are a few, I suppose, challenge areas that I identified and that are kind of reoccurring things that keep on cropping up in the work that I end up being involved in. And I put them into these 4 different categories: equality, diversity and inclusion, team, staff and community, technology and sustainability, and design for growth and scale. So I wanted to explore these particular problem areas, but I didn't want to go inwards in terms of the industry I'm already in, because I know this one and I know what we're doing. I wanted to go out a little bit, so I interviewed specialists from other adjacent industries within the creative sector, but places like West End theatre, film, TV, games. Found out what they're doing about some of these tricky areas and see if there's any learnings we can take from them and we can adapt them into what we're doing. And as a result of this, I've created a series where I'm going to kind of go through my learnings that I've got from each of these things. Here in the top on the right are the previews of what the topics are going to be in addressing each of these things. So that's the first one. I'm going to be releasing this later down the line, but I've called it the Sage series because the idea of being a sage feels quite pedestaled, doesn't it? Like at some point you're going to be this all-knowing person who just shares all the wisdom. When actually we're all learning all the time. We're kind of all sages in progress. So I mean, that's why I wanted to kind of call it that. It's like we're always learning, we're always becoming better and expanding our knowledge all the time. So I want to look at this word that this phrasing that we've chosen, which was horror twist. So horror twist we've chosen because horror is a really interesting world to be working in. People consider different things as horror. Some people identify as full-on horror fans for anything. It's remotely horror, I'm in. Or they could be certain subgenres of horror. Yes, I would only be doing those ones. And some people would not touch anything with the H word with a barge pole. Now, as we saw earlier, the word horror experiences brought up lots of different things for you guys as well. Now, we did a survey of over 1,000 people nationally about horror and horror experiences. We asked them, would you identify as a fan of the horror genre? And 76% of people actually said yes. Now, considering horror's not really for everyone, we were like, it's a pretty high figure. We also then asked, okay, regardless of whether you're a fan of horror, are you a fan of any of these other genres? And every single person said yes to at least one of these. You've got psychological drama, which was the most popular one at 25%, science fiction thriller, dark fantasy, magic realism, and social thriller. Now, all of those genres often have elements of horror in some sort of way within them. You might experience some sort of something within that genre, which you don't realize is probably also could also be called horror as well. It just doesn't have the horror label on it. But it meant everybody was interested in those sort of things. So that's why we've gone for the word horror twist. It's to manage audience expectations. Because we're going, yes, it might have an element of horror. However, it might not be in the way that you necessarily would perceive horror to be. It also might bring in some of these other genres that actually do pull from the horror genre. So our second R&D project that we did was we were one of the Amplify Publishing prototype teams, where we explored the future of immersive horror. And from this, we created 3 prototypes, which were looking at 3 different focuses. That was intelligent design, new forms of storytelling, and Web3 technologies. Through this, so the first one, we identified there were 2 needs for people who make immersive horror. And the one was for being able to quickly iterate meaningful interactions. The second thing is people wanted original, robust monsters. They're actually harder to create than you'd think. So we ended up creating a monster design toolkit for people who wanted to create really good monsters. We also came up with a Stormjar, which is a workshopping format which uses techniques from video games and theatre to help people quickly design iterations of how they design and iterate how they work and interact with audiences. In terms of exploring new forms of storytelling, we created a video game and film prototype that connects to a live event using Web3 technology. And then as a result of that, we managed to build a foundation of the Web3 technology we would be using to create the Nightmare Market, which is going to be our experience, where the Web3 technology is incorporated within a live show. We also said that we wanted to make work for modern audiences. So in terms of modern audiences, we wanted to think about who are the audiences currently that are consuming this type of content, who is consuming horror. Horror evolves with its audience, so it needs to be relevant in terms of the horror that we're making. And this also means not assuming that your audience is 15 to 24 years old, as you usually think is a typical horror audience. So, for example, we've seen a shift of people really embracing psychological horror over the past 10 years. And there's more of a wider, more mainstream audience for this type of content. In our survey that we did with over 1,000 people nationally, we asked them to rank the top 3 horror subgenres that were kind of their favorites, and they put psychological horror at the top. Kind of some further sort of looking out towards that about the audience. Looking at something like It Follows, which was a horror film that came out in 2015. The marketing company who did a marketing campaign for this film is called Groovy. And they made a campaign which was targeting the typical horror audience, which was 15 to 24-year-olds. And when they did that, they found that that audience who watched the film, they complained heavily about it. They thought it was boring, they didn't think it was scary as it promised to be. Lots of them asked for their money back and wanted their life back because they hated it. So they changed their technique and they went for an older audience, which was not the norm of what you're supposed to do with horror films. And an older audience, so over 35s, they didn't just like it, they loved it. And as you can see here, the click-through rate, how much more there was a click-through rate of the over 35s when they targeted them, and the reduced cost as well because so many were clicking. So this is about not making assumptions of what type of audience you might have and being able to kind of adapt and change. And then, of course, we've got Nope. That is Jordan Peele's 3rd horror film that just came out, I think it was last weekend. And this is really great to see in terms of how broad an appeal horror can have and is having at the moment. As you can see here, in terms of its opening weekend, it has an almost equal split of a white and black audience, which is great to see there's so much wide appeal and broad appeal for this type of content. And I know this is very film specific in these 2 examples. However, films are still the major way people are consuming horror content, so it's a good way to kind of get a gauge and reading of what's going on and what people are viewing horror as. Plus, they're original stories. And Nope actually did so well in the box office. It was one of the most successful weekends for an original film in the past 3 years. And in a world of remakes and rehashing old IP that we're all nostalgic for, we're always going to champion anything original that is doing well. Okay, our last R&D project was by Audience of the Future, because we were looking at our audiences and we're looking at, obviously, the future of immersive horror. And of course, you need to factor in new technology within that. So we wanted to go, okay, how does new tech, such as Web3 that we were looking at in our Amplified Publishing project, how will that affect the audience experience? And we ended up with some key findings. I'm being very brief because I don't have time to go into detail of all of these. But from the audience experience when it comes to any new technology, first finding was that whatever the quality of the tech is that they get access to or see, it will change their perceived value of the experience. So be careful if you're using new tech and it's not of a specific quality. The audience satisfaction drives recommendations and, quite critically, return visits, which is really what you're wanting and needing. And audiences are actually desiring more contact with hybrid experiences. They don't just want that one time, they want repeatedly more and more contact. From an industry perspective, we had some key criteria that we identified in terms of any use of new technology, whether that be Web3 or otherwise, and that is that it needs to be desirable by an audience. It needs to be green, and you can certify it's green. And it needs to have a clear value proposition. It needs a clear code of conduct in how it's used. And it needs some sort of, I know you can't really see here, but it's industry standard security. So These were kind of the main criteria we've set if you're going to be using any new tech.
Oh, it's me now. Hello. Where's the little...
Doodah's there.
What are these actually called? Is it called a doodah? Is that the official term? I'm going to talk about these things. I'm going to talk about approaching creating experiences, which is a really clunky sentence. I'm going to talk about the Nightmare Market, our next steps. I'm going to share with you some tools and tricks. I'm going to plug following us. And also, we've founded something called the Southwest England Immersive Experiential Network. On reflection, we could have given it a snappier title, but that's an opportunity for you to bring your own work, get involved, and access opportunities. The thing that's been really core to us, we're both horror fans, we love horror, is making sure we make experiences that are consistent with the feeling that's driving us. And to go about doing that this time, we've tried to be really clear in building briefs for ourselves, and this is what those briefs look like. As Sophie alluded to earlier, one of the big segments of that survey were people describing they wanted psychological horror experiences. Originally, when we were getting into this and applying for these projects, there was a term coming out called elevated horror, which is, there's been some interesting films over the last few years, things like Titan, like It Follows, which is seeing a resurgence in horror, which is cool. And the conversation, the critical conversation around it was like using this new term, but actually audiences don't use it. So that's great. We don't have to get in the weeds of whether it's pretentious or not. We're just going to use psychological horror. And that helps manage expectations, because the two biggest challenges that Audience of the Future found with immersive experiences is managing expectations and rules of engagement. If your audience doesn't know what they're going to go do, it makes it really difficult for them to get over that barrier and give it a shot. It's a big ask. And the other side of it is like, well, what do I do once I'm there? We have a pet peeve. We don't like to be made into the heroes at a show. I hate it so much. Like, you arrive somewhere, you just finished parking the car, and they're like, yeah, you're the hero, here's a MacGuffin, now give it to that actor, and now let's go. And you're like, I don't know why I should care about this. I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. I feel really awkward. And that's a really bad verb, design verb, is making your audiences feel awkward. Repeat visitation, I think, is a nut this industry needs to crack. Anecdotally, we went to Punch Drunk's new show recently. The people in front of us have been 7 times. Their daughter had been 20. It's like 90 quid a ticket, right? And yet that show, even the rewards exploration, and you can have different experiences in it, it's not specifically set up for repeat visitation. So designing these spaces and these experiences where the last visit changes the next one, where interactions you had can play out over much longer form storytelling, not only, I think, offers really unique creative opportunities from a devising perspective, but also commercial ones. Things like season tickets, things like DLC content analogous to the way the video game industry has gone. Goes without saying, this is something I'll touch on in a moment with another slide, but horror has a very specific relationship to this, which I think is quite special. And it's important that we honor that as well. Immersive events, we've worked in a few startups over the years. We've run a few startups over the years. And it can be very hard on the people involved. You know, actors can be performing to hundreds of people every night. It can take a real toll. It can be hard to make them profitable and fair. So it's something that we've been reflecting upon as how do we build these things to be equitable and kind, not just to the people that we work with, but to ourselves as well. There's no point in building something if it destroys us, you know? Diversifying income across digital and live. We saw that through the pandemic. A lot of immersive companies try and create content. And quite a lot of it was sort of akin to a karaoke session in a Zoom chat, which is sort of like my worst nightmare. So I feel that as the industry kind of matures and explores how we address that divide between digital and live, you're going to get richer, more authentic experiences online. And in terms of what we're hoping to do is to connect those things together in a less disjointed way. I'm fascinated about emergent storytelling. I'm going to talk about it in a bit more detail, but I think it's the real affordance of the medium. So when we were doing the zombie game, you get chased by zombies across the city, we would spend a lot of time writing and stressing over the script. And that story you tell is really important because it helps you devise interactions. If we hadn't written the script, we would have never thought of to contact a professional amputee actors guild and work with professional amputees, get riot police, all of these things that create that spectacle. But the real story that people take away from the evening is, I haven't run since I was a kid, and then this zombie singled me out, and then my girlfriend pushed me in front of a zombie, and then I almost threw up. And like, that's their experience. That's the most profound story that they take away. And often your narrative, the thing you want people to experience, is kind of clashes with that, and it can be quite clunky. And you can get these interactions where it's just like an exposition dump. See prior point where someone's telling you you're the hero, and you're like, no, I'm James. I'm not the hero. I don't want to be the hero. Stop giving me things. It's important we future-proof and that we can scale in step. We obviously don't have the resources of people like Disney. We have to be smart about the choices we make and how we anticipate technological change. This kind of ties into the accessibility thing. Horror is a very special genre because it's two sides of a coin. On one side, it's been a medium that has done a fantastic job of having a low barrier to entry, and as a result of that, championing diverse voices and lived experiences, and contextualizing those lived experiences by being like, this is really fucking frightening for me. Come watch this film and you can experience that as well. But on the other side of the coin, it's also a genre that has caricatured, demonized, exploited minorities and lived experiences of lots of different types of people. And that's a very ugly side to it too. So it's very important, especially if the genre is going through this kind of resurgence right now, that we honor the best parts of it. So what do I consider to be immersive? I consider it to be crossing a threshold. We have our fancy pants definition that she went through earlier, but I've been thinking about this a lot, this idea of crossing over a threshold, because I've come to this kind of, this internal perspective, and this isn't gospel, this is just my opinion, that immersion is an altered state. So an altered state of consciousness is anything that kind of takes you out of your normal day-to-day. So that might be psychoactive drugs, that might be insomnia, that might be starvation, that might be an extreme experience, like a survival experience, or grieving. And those altered states, they have this power to be transformative experiences. Quite a lot of the ones I just listed are pretty miserable, but in an immersive setting, if you are fans of immersive experiences, often you'll speak to people who've been to these events, and there'll be one in the back of their mind that they will say changed their life. And it's that kind of transformation that I think this can specifically offer when thinking about it as an altered state. And this is important to me because what I realize is I want to make people feel human in a really ancient way. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And fear, you're looking very confused, and I understand that. Fear is a really good example of this. You can be connected to the world, you can feel every bit the modern human, but walk in the woods at night by yourself, it doesn't matter what technology you have with you, you're going to get that sense that something's wrong, that there's something malevolent out there. I think that's so powerful. I think that's so exciting. And in an age where our emotions and decisions are being nudged and pushed by algorithms and data, and we have dependency on digital devices, I think, which are really successful at making us not feel human, scaring someone silly is really powerful. But I think there's also richer emotions than just fear in there. And this is what I've been thinking about in terms of the nightmare market. So the big driver there of making people feel ancient, I'm obsessed with this guy called David Williams, who's this archaeologist. And he has this book called The Mind in the Cave. And it's his theory about how consciousness emerges in human beings through the lens of looking at Neolithic cave art. And he puts forward this argument that we are neurologically and biologically hardwired to see the world in tiers, that there is a heaven, that there is a hell, that there's a spiritual underworld, and that going into a cave was a sacred space. Going into that space was traveling into one's own mind to be able to reach out and connect with the animals that you wanted to hunt, that kind of thing. It's like, wow, what a compelling experience. That being your truth, that to go into a cave was to go into the underworld. That's what I want to do with this, right? It's a bit of a weird pitch, but the nightmare market is a market where monsters trade the nightmares of humankind. That's the vision. And you submit your nightmare. It's minted, turned into an NFT, that's yours. You bring it to the market, there's loads of monsters, you can trade your nightmare with them for other nightmares or other experiences. A nightmare is essentially a tiny little horror story, and what we are doing is building an economy based on storytelling. That's the aspiration. There's a digital twin version of the market, there's the live immersive market, and you can go and you can interact between both. And what I'm hoping is people will step across that threshold and feel like they're in a space where it feels like spirits are real, and that they are alive, and they are weird, and feral, and creepy. Here's a render. There's kind of like a bit of an image of what it might look like. And this is another render, which is less exciting, I realise now that we have it on the screen, but there's a space in Bath that we've been working with the council to open. It's like a 100-year-old set of vaults. That's where we're hoping to hold it. We built a digital twin of it in Unreal to pitch with them. They're quite excited by it, which is good. This is one of those vaults. Upon reflection, it's not the most thrilling image, but that's fine. So what now? We need to test some stuff and make some bits, and that's as much for us as it is for things like investors. So we're going to be releasing a series of different small experiences that validate parts of our model. We shot a short film in virtual production as part of Amplified Publishing. That comes with an NFT wrapper where you can talk to one of the characters, and if she likes you, she'll send you a nightmare. You'd be able to bring that to the show and trade it. All of these little experiences connect together. If you go to one, get an NFT from that, come to another, it will change the experience you have at that one. So we've got to test all of these with little things. We've got a little show that's going to be coming to Encounters that you'll be able to come. You'll be able to find out about it via our mailing list, which I'll come to in a bit. And the film will be going into competition. So hopefully it'll be coming to places near you soon. Oh yeah, that. I'm now going to talk about some approaches and useful bits. With the 5 minutes I have left. Commercial trumps creative isn't that commercial is more important than creative. It's that we've found you can always make creative work harder to match up your commercial needs. There is an impulse, I think, in creative people, and I've been very guilty of this in the past, that you have an idea that you're excited about, and then it's like, right, I'm not going to compromise on this at all. And yet, compromising it and working through it a number of times to make it fit the budget or the time scale or being kind to yourselves often makes the idea better. So this is a maxim that we live by. Understand logistics. This is not a very exciting one, so I'll be very quick. I don't mean the logistics of your operation. I mean literally go find out about shipping and pallets and how some boxes nest into other boxes. It just makes planning for touring, planning for storage, planning for doing anything with your event much more realistic. It's best practice to design anything interactive by being interactive. Hands up anyone who's made a game before, approach making a game. It's really hard making a game on paper without someone to test it. It basically breaks the second they touch it. So one of the things we're organizing is an opportunity for anyone to come and make a thing. That will be happening in the autumn. I sort of stole this and changed this from the games industry. In the games industry, it's fail fast and follow the fun. That doesn't really work with horror, because you're trying to terrify people. So we changed it to fail fast and follow the feeling, but I mean, the emphasis is the same. Feelings are quite, are easier to keep consistent, but they're malleable to lots and lots of different forms. So you can end up with something that is maybe a million miles away from your original idea, but is still the same thing. There's a great video game called Edith Finch, What Remains of Edith Finch. And that started off as a game where they wanted to explore the feeling of being a scuba diver and the ocean floor falling away into like nothingness. And what they ended up with was a game about a teenager going to her cursed family home, which is very different, but the feeling is consistent. Gut instinct's really good to drive you in the first bit. As soon as you can migrate onto testing and data, do, because it stops you from getting emotionally dependent on validation for your ideas from others, and it makes it much easier to break the thing and arrive at something that really works. Here's some tools. If you don't have a business plan, this is like the quickest business plan that we've come up with. It's 4 pillars: creative, commercial, community, and culture. We will write a thing about this and put it up somewhere, so if you don't remember it, it's fine. Creative is like, what's your creative red line? what will you never compromise on? Commercial is like, what's your commercial red line? Kind of goes without saying, but most people don't have one. So I would recommend, what does it look like with 50% profit in the first instance? And then usually what happens is that immediately breaks the creative. So you're already in a place where you have to compromise. Culture is, what do you want your workplace culture to be like? Do you want to be kind? Do you want to work 4 days a week? Do you want to offer mental health days, etc.? What's the red line? And then community is, what's the impact on your town, your city, your sector? And you can hold all 4 of those things in your head at any time, in any conversation, and anyone involved in your business can learn them and action them immediately, which allows for you to shape ideas with a team very early on, but everyone's on the same page. So it's like an embryonic business plan. It can be developed later. But if you're like me, the first time I wrote a business plan, I treated it like an essay from school, and I hated writing it, and I used all these stupid words like therefore in it, and then it made it miserable to read, miserable to look at, and it just sat on my shelf, and I didn't reference it. So this is like a much more lightweight version. Unreal is amazing. If you haven't played around with it, it's changing everything from film to games to architectural renders. How many different ways have we used Unreal? Okay. We shot a film in virtual production. I built the entire set in Unreal in my pants in my living room. All of our renders are made in Unreal. A venue that we were pitching for from Bath, we LiDAR scanned and dropped it into Unreal, and then I used that as a map to rebuild it. No code, none of this has code, right? Rebuild it, and you can walk around with the controller, and we were able to put that in the hands of Bath Council pretty quickly. What else have we used it for? It controls DMX lighting. So if you build a digital twin of your show, you can rig it with all of your lighting, program it, and then plug it into a DMX board, and it will do the real lighting. It's like unbelievable. Loads of the assets are free. Unreal also runs its own like grant system called Mega Grants. Super cool. Highly recommend poking it. It is how the Mandalorian Star Wars film was made, for instance. And a lot of the same assets that they used in that film are free, right? They're called mega scans. So big thumbs up on that. We made a monster design toolkit. I don't have enough time to go through it, but I'll tell you my favorite card. It's tell me about its teeth. Love it. But I think there's a lot of value in making your own tools. And I think this is the first time we've really embraced that, and that's been really helpful because I love complaining about other people's monsters. And then was like, oh no, someone's going to do that to me. So it's really important our monsters are top notch. Midjourney, this is a relatively new one for me, but I thought I'd just show it because it's super cool. Midjourney is an AI that you can interact with on Discord, and you give it text, and it spits you out images. And when you're like in the early stage of creating stuff, if you've got like these ideas that you're finding hard to put words to, or it's just super early, getting images back immediately that are really cool, pretty good. Desolate Abbey, Lavender Field, Yorkshire, monsters chasing human beings in a cave painting. I just put those words in, it came up with that. Nightmare Market. It's way better than the render I spent hours making. It's really frustrating, but there's something really compelling about having your like the fragments of your ideas brought to life immediately. And it can be a really useful resource for things like mood boards and so on and so forth. So highly recommend it, and it's free. Obviously, the Sophies Sage series, which she's going to be putting out through the Southwest England Immersive and Experiential Network, SWEENEY, which we've decided to put through LinkedIn because I like how most people have a hate relationship with LinkedIn. Therefore, it doesn't interfere with people's lives like WhatsApp or Telegram. You know, no one's like, oh God, these LinkedIn notifications, I feel so compelled to check them out. So it feels like quite a kind space through how dry and desolate it is. But join that LinkedIn group. We're hoping to run a jam as part of Encounters, which will be free. And anyone with any relationship to immersive or no relationship at all can come and make something, form a group. There'll be a theme that's announced on the Friday. It happens on the Saturday and Sunday. It'll be somewhere central in Bristol. Don't worry if you've got no experience. Don't worry if you want to come with a pre-existing project or idea. That's also fine. The idea is basically the Southwest is an informal powerhouse when it comes to immersive. We have incredible volumetric capture technology companies here. We have My World, the Watershed. We've got Bristol and Bath Creative R&D. We've got the amazing universities. We've got the festival scene. So there's loads of different competing visions and ideas of what immersive is. And what really excites me is getting them in a room and kind of mushing them together and seeing what they make. So that's an opportunity in a very friendly way just to come down. But that group as well is also where funders are going to put up opportunities where you can connect with other people, ask questions about technology you might want to adopt. So it's just really like a fun, safe space. And then that's us on that side of the screen. It's just like I'm facing front on, so there's no left and right. Sign up to our mailing list. We're nice. I don't think we've ever posted anything in the mailing list yet. We're saving it for stuff where you can actually come do something. And we'll be distributing stuff that people can try and feedback on, where they'll get special perks for any events we run later on as well. So it's a nice, friendly thing. And that is us. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
There was so much there. Like,
It's a bit of information overloady.
I know, like really amazing. So we got a little bit of time for Q&A. If you're online, pop your questions or even any comments in the chat. Jay's going to read them out for us. And if you're in the room, just stick up your hand. We'll pass around the mic. The mic is for the online audiences, so just make sure I hold it close to your face, like we've got here. But yeah, would anyone like to kick off with a question? Cool. Yep. Let me come over.
I'm glad you got the memo about the outfit, by the way.
Definitely.
So can you explain hybrid experiences in your world then? So like you say digital and live, like how does it actually work?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I should have spent more time explaining. What I think about when I think about the utility of NFTs, and I'm not interested in them particularly as like a speculative art commodity. What's interesting about them is the utility of them, or the promise of the utility of them. So one of the things that really inspired me, I can't remember the name of the project now, but it was put out by Snark Art, was these digital artworks, they're NFTs, that every time they're interacted with, they evolve and change. And this idea of these like digital assets having a life of their own is really compelling, because you can give people tokens, you can give people MacGuffins. Do people know what I mean by MacGuffin? In Pulp Fiction, which one is it? It's the most famous Pulp Fiction film where they do the dance. What's the one I'm talking about?
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction, yes. The gold thing in the briefcase, right? You never know what it is, right? That's a MacGuffin. Right? It's a thing that propels a story along. And you can be handed like a prop in a show, but you don't have any relationship to it, and someone has to tell you why it's important. What I think is really interesting with our NFTs is you're submitting your own nightmare in the first instance. So you have a direct relationship to that, and that's ownership. That NFT can be traded live, or it can be traded digitally. We can do things like, there's unique content. You can only watch this film if you have a particular nightmare, and by going to that website with that in your wallet, it will unlock it. I'm not particularly that interested in charging for these things. I think it's much more interesting when they're like being traded and built upon, and that you are there with the monster being like, this nightmare about bees. How much do I want to trade for this nightmare about bees? I hate bees. So, and like, I think that's really interesting, because one, that talks to that idea of an emergent experience. What nightmares and other NFTs and things you've collected in your possession can unlock different experiences, different conversations. But it just allows the monsters to be, offer something completely unique each time. And that could happen live, or it could happen in a digital twin. That could be in VR chat. That could be even as simple as Discord. We just really want to make sure that those spaces are performative and don't feel like you're chatting to a strange man on MSN in the mid-90s, basically. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I know I'm talking to a performer and this is a monster and I know what the social contract here is, and it's not like, I don't know what's going on. So that's kind of how we see it. Did that answer your question at all? Yeah, cool.
Sorry if that was me. Right, so we've got a little question online, Jade.
Yeah. So they actually asked a question about the NFTs, and they said that you answered their question, so I won't read that one out. But someone asked, James, did you write Mask Boy?
Yes. Yeah. It was a highly erotic thriller. I did slam poetry for many years. One of the first projects I got to do as part of being in the studio was work with Splash and Ripple, who produced that show, and it was just like a poetry collection, an immersive performance thing. That's a blast from the past. That came out in like 2012, so that's cool.
Back to the NFTs again. Just when you were saying trading digitally, trading live, so is there separate physical live assets, or is it the digital assets that you're able to trade live that would then obviously somehow have kind of...
The latter.
Okay.
The latter, digital. And that brings with it some issues, right?
Yeah.
That brings with it like people having screens out and immersive show, which is like you're letting in the real world. So there's we were originally looking at like some quite high-tech ways of how you would minimize the lag between transactions, ways that you could occlude that digital layer so it was less prominent and you weren't having people just going around like this. We think we've actually got like a really cheap analog way of doing it, which we need to test, basically. Part of the reason we wanted to work with Web3 is there's all of these interesting promises around proof of participation. Especially if that's programmable and you can track people without personal data and the way that you track it is meaningful to them, that's cool. But there's still a lot to be worked out. I think the massive crypto crash that's just happened, though, is really helping us out because a lot of the resources that were going into high speculative Web3 stuff is now going, oh, okay, not that. Utility, yeah, let's make stuff that works and is robust, which we're super jazzed about. So I'm hoping by the time we're in a position that we can properly raise, we'll either know that through prototyping, we can scale a solution we've built, or preferentially, someone will have come along and cracked it and we can just pay for that service. That would be lovely. The only thing for us, the most important thing is that it uses something like Tezos, because you can measure the transaction's carbon footprint and it's very small compared to something like Ethereum, which is like horrendous. Okay. I can go into specific numbers if people want a nap, but
So someone says, what platform did you use for your NFTs? Was it a low energy one? And if you were doing things in Web3, how do you stop people who are only interested in NFTs for speculation from ruining the market for genuine customers?
Yeah, great. I mean, as I said, so on the first thing, like Tezos, the reason why we went with Tezos is I worked with PwC last year on a project for COP26, and I had the opportunity of working with some of their data team around environmental data, which was really handy. So they worked with Tezos and to 2 ISO standards, which is kind of like the best industry practice at the moment for vetting carbon footprint of like commercial processes. Measured the environmental impact, and it's 2.5 grams per transaction for Tezos. An average 10-mile drive in a family car is 4 kilos, I think, off the top of my head. So Tezos is like orders of magnitude smaller than most other chains. That's because it's something called proof of stake rather than proof of work. Most chains are moving now from being proof of work. It's all very jargony, but Bitcoin is terrible, right? Like massive, massive impact. Same with Ethereum. I think Bitcoin was like the equivalent of Argentina or something last year. And it's because computers have to like solve things. They have to mine, they have to be running, whereas proof of stake is, I think, using game theory off the top of my head. Anyway, we went with what we could trust. And that gave us a baseline for experimentation. Everything we're doing is in very low numbers, so we can measure and offset that impact there. And then in terms of like speculation, I mean, maybe someone's nightmare would go for loads of money, potentially. I don't know. I think they're only really going to have value within our story ecosystem, and that's really to us where it matters. If someone goes and tries to flog it, they can, but unless we are unbelievably successful and people are like, oh my God, it's like Pokemon cards or whatever, I think their primary utility is always going to be in servicing your own experience rather than as like a speculative product.
There's someone online, but if there's anyone...
I'll tell you what, go ahead.
Hello. So is the idea that there's like two parts to the live experience? There's like two main parts, like that you are there's a trading activity that happens like live with the monsters, and then an experiencing activity. Like, how do you unlock the experience that you've just bought? I guess that's...
These are huge. Oh, you don't buy them. You come to the market.
Traded.
You buy a ticket. As part of that, you can bring your own nightmare. You can create your own nightmare. You can get others online through other activities. A lot of this still has to be worked out, but essentially it would work like a night market where you walk around, you talk to characters, and it's barter-based.
Okay.
And I'm really excited by that rather than it being like a point of sale, where it's like, you have to buy this nightmare, and then you can go in the room with the monster, and then the monster will tell you a story. It's much more exciting, I think, if you're like, I dreamt about, okay, I have a phobia of wasps and bees, so this is why this is going to keep coming up. But like, I dreamt about hornets last night, and the guy's like, I'm not really a hornet guy. But that monster over there, he makes these amazing like potions with that kind of thing. Go chat to them. And it just means that I have agency. One of the things we're really excited about is all the monsters having competing belief systems as to what nightmares are for. It's kind of like apothecary rather than it being like, you know, proper medicine. So because there's these kind of competing, almost like religious properties to it, it means it gives you a chance to explore quite a rich world and different interpretations of this one thing that you've made. And hopefully that's going to be pretty cool.
Oh, that makes sense. Thanks.
And I think...
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if there was... maybe I come at it from a slightly flippant angle. So the nightmare market, are you going to say that these have to be things that they have actually dreamt from their sleep? Or obviously if people are tapping into the sort of darker side of their imaginations or their experience, are you factoring in any kind of professional psychological side? Because
100%.
Also, you know, PTSD and
100%.
The trauma side, which can create nightmare, and how
100%.
If you're sort of factoring that as well.
Yeah, and also when it comes to those two-pronged problems with immersive experience of like managing expectations and rules of engagement, if you as the audience member don't know what's happening, it's impossible for us as designers to anticipate what might trigger you. You know, after I'm neurodiverse, and like after the pandemic, obviously spent a lot of time inside by myself, or with her as well. And the first time I was on like a tube line in London, especially the Jubilee one, which was like really horrible, like screaming metal, I found it like super overwhelming, and I found it really challenging. And I would have never even anticipated that myself. So having best practice in terms of like really clear rules of engagement, a quiet reflection space, an exit experience that brings people out. We're thinking about how a psychopomp, literally like a spirit guide, will bring people in and out of that. A lot of the work I did into multisensory storytelling was with a psychologist as well. He specializes in eating disorders, which was really interesting because eating disorders are driven by the stories people tell themselves about themselves. So yeah, there's a lot that we need to still test on how we get that right. Also things like, you know, someone might just write, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre story and be like, yeah, this is my dream. And like, that's a problem because that's IP, but also it's not very interesting. So there's a lot to work out, which is why we're going to do the little experiences, which we would love you guys to come to and feedback on, because you can only design it in conversation. No problem.
Any other questions in the room or online? We might. I've been told by Jade we might have run out of time. So thank you very much for like such an interesting talk. I've got loads of questions I'll probably ask you afterwards anyway. So thank you so much for joining us today. I know at the start I said these talks are every Friday at 1 o'clock. There's a little bit of a change for August. So there's no lunchtime talk or Open Studio Friday or First Friday or Makeshift in August. We are taking a little bit of a summer break, but all of these events will carry on as usual from September. We will also be closed from Monday the 29th of August to Thursday the 1st of September, but we're back open from Friday the 2nd of September with a First Friday and lunchtime talk. So if you want to stick around in Hot Desk with us today, please do. Or if you want to find out more about what we do, the studio, come have a chat with any of the members of the studio team. Tell you what, studio team, give us a little wave. Some here. Danielle right at the back in the kitchen. And we will be happy to help and have a chat. If you're watching online, please drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. That's it. Thank you for being here today, and we will see you all in a month's time.
Thank you. She can't see me.